Yeah, I actually take issue a little bit when you say gay marriage because it makes it sound like it's something different, like we're asking for a right that other people don't have, and that's emphatically untrue. We just want the same thing the heterosexuals have.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. In 2014, marriage equality was achieved in Alaska thanks to a case called Hamby versus Parnell. Although there were 5 couples involved, it was named after Matt Hamby, who is our guest today, along with his husband, Chris Sheldon. Matt Hamby and Chris Sheldon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You guys are the case that legalized gay marriage in Alaska.
Right. Us along with 4 other couples.
Right. But Hamby is the name that's on the case. Mm-hmm. Because you guys filed first? Is that...
Not exactly. What it had more to do with was of the 5 couples, and there were 2 cases that were combined. And of the 5 couples, there was discussion among the legal staff, and they did feel that Matt was a little bit more versed in all of the issues. He did a lot of homework. He did a lot of and he did a lot of discussion with them. And so they were like, I think maybe we should put him first.
Let's start a little before that. I'll start with Matt. So where are you from? How'd you get to Alaska? What's your story?
So I moved here in December of 1997, which kind of stands out because that was right about the time that Alaska enshrined discrimination against homosexuals in its constitution. But moved here from Utah. Grew up in Utah, rather. Moved here from New Mexico. I was in New Mexico studying pharmacy in Albuquerque, and then came here directly for adventure.
Did you grow up Mormon?
I did. The whole family was Mormon, goes back for generations, and became rather dissatisfied with the Mormon church when they started inserting themselves in politics, particularly in California, with Proposition 8. And so when that happened, I had been an active member for a long time and just let things go. But I decided that I had to stand up for what was right, and I asked them to excommunicate me. I said I didn't want anything to do with them.
I'm not familiar with that process. Do you send? How do you ask to be excommunicated?
Normally, it's something that happens to you when they deem you unworthy, like you do something that is against whatever serious belief they have. But you can go through a process and make a request. It's not quite as simple as it sounds because they're very hesitant to let you go. And once I'd made that request in writing, they kept coming around and really harassing us, in particular Chris. They would send local representatives from their lay ministry trying to bring us back into the fold, or bring me back into the fold, and didn't want to let me go.
Right. So when they said they were harassing Chris, because they felt like Chris made you gay, or
no, that's not quite the way it went. They were trying to reach Matt, and Matt was either unavailable or he wouldn't talk to them, and I wouldn't. So they weren't actually harassing me, and I didn't even really look at it like that because I think from their standpoint, Matt's he's got an insider view of the situation, and he has his opinions about it. But from their standpoint, I think they wanted to retain a member. They wanted to keep somebody around, and he was asking to be let go, and they were trying to convince him not to be. So I was the one that was here, so I was the one that talked to them.
That's so unexpected.
So I grew up with it, and when you grow up with things, a lot of times you don't ask the right questions. But as I got older, you can see this discrimination, not just against homosexuals, but against black people, against women. And I just found it untenable, and I just had to reject it formally.
So I assume your family is still Mormon, most of the members?
None of them are active.
Okay.
Immediate family.
So you moved up to Alaska in 97, just before the amendment to the Constitution recognizing only marriage between a man and a woman. Were you politically active then, or was it just kind of something that you saw on the sidelines? Or
somewhere in between. I was very taken aback by the ads that I think were mostly financed with Mormon money in the state.
Wow.
Showing, how allowing for same-gender marriage would ruin traditional marriage and take away rights from straight couples. And the scare tactics and the lies that are promoted by groups of people like the Mormons, it's very reprehensible. I can't understand why they do that.
You moved up here by yourself?
Mm-hmm.
When did you guys meet?
We met in 2005.
Okay.
Actually, we met the first time in 2003.
Okay.
We had a friend that introduced us at a local brew pub, Hamby's.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to break from Matt and then get a little bit of Chris's story.
Okay.
Chris, what's your story? How did you get to Alaska? Where are you from?
I grew up in New Jersey. My folks are from the Western States, and they moved to New Jersey when I was a kid. And so I grew up there, went to school there, went to college there. And when I finished college, I moved up here in '93, right after graduation. And I was supposed to just come up for a little while. And my plans were to go into the Peace Corps, but I kind of fell in love with Alaska and ended up staying. And I got a job with the state of Alaska in 2004 with the Department of Fish and Game, and I worked for them seasonally at first, but from 2004 through the end of 2016.
Did you have a supportive family as far as you coming out as gay?
Well, I wasn't. When I first moved up here, I wasn't really out. My parents were always very supportive. My siblings had a little more trouble with it. My step-siblings did not have any trouble with it. So, yeah, I had a supportive family.
And was it because your siblings were religious?
And we did not grow up religious. Some of that has changed, but my parents were agnostic when I was a kid and became pretty atheist as I got older, and that was just not part of the message. My parents were very supportive once I finally got around to telling them what was going on. They were extremely supportive.
And do you remember when Alaska was passing the amendment to the Constitution?
Yeah. I moved up in '93,
right.
so I was well aware of it when it was happening. Yeah.
And were you out by the time it was happening?
Not really.
Not really.
I'm not a political person, really, and coming out for me was a long process. It started with a few friends and a little bit of the family, and then kind of went on. And I wasn't completely out until I got married to Matt.
Interesting. So you guys met in 2003 at Hamby's when a friend introduced you. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, that was pretty much it. We were introduced. Matt took my number, and I ran into him again in 2005, and then we started dating. But it took 2 years before first meeting and second meeting.
When did you think we want to get married?
We got engaged in 2008.
Oh, okay. So y'all been living together for a few years.
Yeah, we started dating in 2005, and we moved in together at the end of 2005. And we lived together for a couple of years, and then we got married in 2008.
We were out, when we decided that we wanted to get married, we were on a 100-mile, week-long canoe trip in Alaska's largest state park, Wood-Tick-Chick. Mm-hmm. So we're about halfway through that trip, or maybe 2/3 of the way through that trip, and then Matt proposed to me on the side of a lake.
So that was 2008.
That would have been more like 2007.
So proposed. You said yes. It's a long time ago. So I'm like remembering back. So then were you like, oh, well, we'll go to Hawaii, or like we'll go someplace where marriage is legal?
We went to Canada.
Okay, so you guys went to Canada and got married in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And we just celebrated 14 years earlier this week.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
14 years is a long time. So then you came back to Anchorage after you got married in Canada. And I guess because I'm just saying 2008 to 2009 was like leading up to the Summer of Hate. Like there was a particularly...
Yeah, it was interesting. We drove to the location where we got married. We drove to Banff, Alberta.
Met about 40 family members there for a wedding.
40 guests came.
And both you had family that came?
Half were family, half were friends, and we both had each. So we were on our way down there, and we heard on the radio that they had just legalized same-gender marriage in California. We were like, "Wow, this is great!" Yeah. And we could have gone there, but so we got married. We finished all that other stuff up, and then, as you say, we progressed towards that period of time.
You're legally married in Canada.
but in Alaska, it wasn't recognized.
That's correct.
Did you feel different after you got married in Canada?
Well, I guess we probably did. We were more interested in asserting our rights as a couple after we got married.
And it was a way to stand up in front of friends and family and demonstrate a commitment and love.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So, I mean, that was what was important in the moment. And then coming back to Alaska, you start to deal with more practical matters. So, like health insurance.
Writing wills and figuring out what was going to be necessary as far as that went. Should one of us, should what would one of us have to pay inheritance tax or something like that? Would we need to create a trust in order to hold our property, so that if it was in one person's name and not another, that family members couldn't take it or what have you.
Visitation in the ICU,
those kinds of things. So we wrote up advanced directives and deposited them at all the hospitals around town, and we worked on our wills and those kinds of things. We had to do things separately because community property doesn't exist for people that aren't considered to be married under law.
Right.
I added Chris to my health plan at Providence. And then shortly thereafter, they started charging me imputed income tax for that benefit.
And I added him to my health care with the state of Alaska, and they did the same thing.
Wow. So you were both getting charged in a way that a straight couple would not be charged.
Correct.
Right. We had to pay taxes on income that otherwise we would not have had to pay.
It wasn't income. It was
considered
fringe benefit.
It was a fringe benefit, and it was considered to have a monetary value that other people weren't getting, which is not true at all because everybody else was getting it.
Right. Talk us through what happened over the next few years that led to being a part of the lawsuit.
Well, we watched during the election that brought Barack Obama to the presidency. Prop 8 was passed in California.
Yeah, it's terrible, weird
dichotomy of things that happened. Yeah. And we watched lawsuits across.
Just for the listeners to understand, so Barack Obama was elected in 2008, but California took away gay marriage with Prop 8.
Right, that was passed by the voters.
At the same time,
right,
which was largely funded and
again by the
Mormons. Right,
and the Catholics. They banded together, I think, for Proposition 8.
Right. Yeah. So it was a very mixed emotion for the LGBTQ community. We're super happy about Barack Obama as president, but saw, looking at horror in California, of all places, taking away gay marriage.
Right, and I'm not sure of all the chronology of it or how everything went down, but, throughout the states there were battles being lost constantly or in some cases won. Some battles were being brought and fought on same-gender marriage in several states at the time, one after the other.
Yeah, I actually take issue a little bit when you say gay marriage because it makes it sound like it's something different, like we're asking for a right that other people don't have, and that's emphatically untrue. We just want the same thing the heterosexuals have.
Right.
I think some people don't get that.
So marriage equality.
When we use terms like that, I think it promotes that misunderstanding.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was talked about at the time too. I think is I don't want to get gay married. I want to get married to the person that I care about.
Right.
I want to spend my life with this person, and I want to provide for them. I want to, extend whatever protection I have over them and take care of them. And that's all we were really looking for.
You watched this happen in California. What were the next steps? I mean, did you guys? Because there was multiple couples involved in the lawsuit. So were you approached? Did you approach somebody? Did you guys seek out a lawyer? I want to kind of get those details.
We did. We decided to seek out Allison Mendel because she's handled similar cases for gay couples for various issues.
So this happened later. This happened after the lawsuit that was won in the state of Utah.
With Derek Kitchen and Moody.
Moody Sobriety, yeah.
So I actually contacted them about their case. And
so you got to teach me about that because I don't follow Utah politics.
Sure.
So what happened in Utah?
So they were actually ahead of us. They
legalized gay marriage in Utah through a court case.
It was a similar district court case, and they won, I believe, on the same two pieces of the 14th Amendment that we did and that Oberfeld was decided on. But I reached out to them and talked to both of them and met them in person, and they told me a bit about their experience, and it gave Chris and I the confidence to want to do the same thing in Alaska, because Alaska had yet to bring a similar case in district court.
At that point, a lot of cases have been tried, and there had been a lot of victories, and Alaska was still an outlier. No case had been brought here. And there was a lot of discussion among, we kind of came on it on our own, but there were other groups discussing whether or not and who should bring the case here as well.
Right, and so Allison Mendel was a lawyer for the Utah couple?
No, she's local.
She's here.
Yeah, she's here. And she brought cases, similar cases, not specifically on marriage, regarding the rights of people like us in the past. And so we thought that she would be a good option. So we contacted her. And in the process of doing that, we talked to some other people. We actually talked to Chris Constant, who is an assembly member that's now running for the House of Representatives.
And a podcast guest.
And a podcast guest coming up.
No.
In the past. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
He made us
aware of another case that was being prepared. And we talked to our lawyer about it, and our lawyer said, well, if there's another case, then we should probably talk to them, and there should probably be one case. So she talked with their lawyers, and we did end up combining forces.
How does that work when you combine, you each have your own lawyer? Like, how do they decide which lawyer is going to be in charge?
I think that they worked on things together, and they divided labor.
But we worked with 3 attorneys then, so it was Allison Mendel, Caitlin Shortell, and Heather Gardner.
Got it.
It was 2014 because it was right after we went to Utah for a family Christmas. We came back and started it, so it was 2014. The whole thing transpired in 2014.
October.
Okay, so you started like in early 2014 and then finished in October 2014.
I believe that's the timeline.
Okay, so you guys combined forces. You have 3 lawyers basically all working together. You sue the state? Like, how does that work?
So we sued the governor and
Parnell?
It was Parnell at the time.
Ultimately Walker.
And several supporting individuals from the government. And I can't actually remember what positions they held. Things like the Attorney General. For the record, Governor Walker inherited the case. He didn't choose it. Just,
But he continued to fight you, because I think there's examples of times where a governor will choose not to.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Correct.
What was the experience like that year, 2014, like being in litigation with the government?
It was a pretty positive experience from my point of view. I can't tell you a single individual who came up to us and said anything derogatory or demeaning or negative at all. Working for Providence, I had people that were higher up in the organization contacting me and telling me that they appreciated the efforts and supported us.
So you guys were in the news, like, from the beginning?
We were.
Yeah, to some degree. It was odd. We were given to expect that there was going to be a lot of mudslinging, a lot of hate pushed our way, and for all we know, there was. But we were not. If I'm honest, we were not reading. We were not on social media.
You weren't looking at the comments.
We weren't looking for it.
Right.
And as a result, we may have only seen the part that we wanted to see. But our experience was not entirely negative. And I do think that since Alaska was among some of the last cases to be tried, there had been a lot of people that had blazed the trails before us.
But
probably took the brunt of a lot of the worst stuff.
But it was published. I mean, we even saw a piece in the New York Times about our case, which kind of surprised me.
It did. It spread. Yeah.
I'm just now making the connection that 2014, gay marriage is happening nationally. So they were kind of happening at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. So was there a period where you guys had achieved gay marriage in Alaska prior to it being federally recognized?
My recollection of the way things went, the Supreme Court case that really solidified it as law of the land came the next year, right?
Obergefell v. Hodges.
That was in
Right.
15, so that happened the next year.
So you guys did your stuff in 2014.
We were doing our stuff at
So-
the same time. They were trying a case in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals
Mm-hmm.
that was overlapping our case, and in fact, we were in court when the decision came down on that case. And when that decision came down, one of our lawyers pointed that out, that this decision was just made, and basically everybody, the courtroom erupted in applause.
Even though you knew it still had to go to the Supreme Court. Like,
Even though,
yeah.
but that was the last one to fall. So at that point, the judge stopped taking arguments
Oh, wow.
and said, well, basically it's time for me to go and deliberate over my decision. That one did, that would have been the law for Alaska anyway.
Right.
And so it did closely influence his decision, the judge's decision, because he would have to be consistent with
Right.
the Ninth Circuit.
How fast from that moment to when you got the verdict?
It's like several days. It was 3 or 4
It was
days.
pretty quick. He did a summary decision, and then he issued it on a Sunday.
Who was the judge?
Burgess? Timothy?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you got the verdict on a Sunday, and I mean, was it just like an enormous party? Or tell us about like that experience. Or
I think we had to go do a couple of interviews for local TV, and then we celebrated with friends. The following day, I'm almost positive, was a state holiday, and so the state was sort of on mute as far as the decision. And I immediately retitled this house, because in Alaska, if you're married, the way you title real property is different than if you're not married, and we had been waiting to do that. So I didn't want to waste any time in exercising that
your new right.
recognition.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about post-married life. Like, what was it like to have your marriage? And I guess, actually, I want to know, like, when the verdict came down, did that mean that your marriage from Canada was now recognized? So you didn't actually have to get married again in Alaska?
No, we did not, and it was recognized. And the way that the decision was written, and the way I understand that they're implemented, is that right has always existed. It's not a new right.
Right.
It's just an interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. So it wasn't something that just happened that day. It should have been happening from its inception.
Yeah, no, I think that's the most confusing thing about saying that marriage is going to be a state decision, is that how does one be married in California but not be married in Nevada?
It's chaos.
It's chaos.
Particularly when you try and do things like file state and federal taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if the federal government recognizes, if they don't recognize marriage between two men or two women, and the state is different, the state return is the basis for the federal return, or vice versa, it gets very confusing. And if you have to file because you have income in various states, but you're married in some of them and you're not married in others.
Right. It's a good point to bring up, since there is so much talk with the fall of Roe v. Wade and the potential for losing Roe v. Wade as kind of taking some of the undergirding for Obergefell v. Hodges, that potentially they could undo federal gay marriage and say this is going to be a state decision again. So we could return to that chaos.
Well, clearly the Supreme Court has become a political pawn, thanks to people in the U.S. Senate, I think, largely, that manipulated the composition of the court.
Well, it was certainly their priority.
For many years.
Mm-hmm.
And, it used to be that this was something that I think would be very difficult to undo. And I'd heard analogies like you can't put the paste back in the tube.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know actually how they would undo it. Perhaps in a worst case scenario, we would end up in a situation where every state is different, just like it'll potentially be with the reproductive rights.
Right. This is what I wish we had a lawyer in the room, but maybe you guys can answer it. So because of your case, that amendment to the Alaska Constitution that says that Alaska only recognizes a man and a woman as being married, a marriage is only between a man and a woman. If Obergefell v. Hodges falls, your court case takes precedent. You know what I mean? Like you've legalized gay marriage in Alaska.
Well, it made that state constitution amendment unenforceable and void.
Right.
Our case.
Right. Got it. If we reverted to Alaska law only, we still have gay marriage in Alaska, thanks to you guys.
I'm not certain of that. I mean, there is a constitutional amendment on the books.
I think that the state would probably choose to, or individuals would try and promote another similar law or constitutional amendment to prohibit it again, just like they've been doing recently with reproductive rights. Even states that have had laws on the books for many years that were deemed unenforceable.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting, and again, I'd like to come back to the chaos, but if your judge was influenced by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision, and then they're going to undo the Supreme Court decision, I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, I have no idea how that works, but I guess then the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision doesn't hold because the Supreme Court is ruling differently. And if your judge used the Ninth Circuit as an influential piece of data, then I wonder, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to feel like I'm being super pessimistic or catastrophizing, but it just seems like because we still have that amendment in our Constitution, that toothpaste could get put back in the bottle.
Maybe, but so would the Supreme Court divorce people that are married now?
Yeah, I know. I don't know what that would.
Or would it simply make it impossible? Because when Prop 8 passed, it didn't delegitimize the same-gender marriages that had occurred in California, but it made it impossible to get new ones.
So you'd like be grandfathered in because we're already married.
We don't want to use that term, grandfathered in.
Okay.
That's considered a very racist term.
Sorry.
It goes back to Jim Crow laws, where if your grandfather could vote, you were allowed to vote, and when people weren't, it was a way of enforcing that people of color could not vote in those states.
So what word would you use?
I would say
continue to be recognized.
There's precedent to continue to recognize it.
Unless the state passed a law or a constitutional amendment that said otherwise, and maybe they would. Would you have polling information on this in Alaska?
Me personally,
I mean, have you seen anything like this?
No. I mean, I think this is how I feel. I don't have any polling data to justify it, but I feel like there's no way that constitutional amendment would pass in Alaska today.
I would agree, but that doesn't mean it's not there now.
Right.
And so we'd have to do another constitutional amendment to remove it.
Yes, exactly. And which is a very high bar.
I think that's a very high bar because there's a lot of people out there that would be, I think gays should probably be allowed to marry, but no, I don't really want to go to all that trouble. I don't want to spend the money. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that,
Right. Well, so the thing I would say is that, and this came out in some studies that were done on Prop 8 in California, there were people who wanted to know why so many people voted for Prop 8. Now, granted, there was a lot of strategy behind the people who brought Prop 8 up, because if you voted yes on Prop 8, it meant that you were against gay marriage, marriage equality. And if you voted no, then you were for marriage equality. And so that in itself was confusing for some voters. Like, if they were pro something, they think they should vote yes. So it was kind of set up in a confusing way.
It was more difficult than spelling Murkowski correctly on a write-in ballot.
Right. And so that there was that. But then there was also, so they did this canvassing. And I'll refer our listeners to our podcast episode with Etan Hirsch, who is a political science professor at Tufts, who talked about deep canvassing, which is when you go door to door and basically are just asking questions, deep questions of people to sort of create a relationship between you and that person. And so they had these gay people who did this deep canvassing where they were like, why did you vote to not allow marriage equality? And their answer was, I don't really know any gay people. Like, that was really the common denominator. They were just like, it doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't matter to me.
Everybody does.
Exactly. So I think that the situation may have changed. The circumstances may have changed in our culture. I don't want to overestimate it, though. I don't want to say that most people in Alaska know a gay person and have good feelings about them and therefore want them to have equal rights. But I think it's certainly higher than 1998.
But it is true. I mean, that's been going on for my entire life, since the 60s at least. You know, people used to hide their sexuality, and sometimes for fear of the law, discrimination, homosexual sex was illegal. You couldn't associate without being harassed in some cities by the police.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then finally, I think you had just the gays had more visibility as entertainers on television and movies,
Ellen,
role models,
And people coming out.
right?
Yeah.
And you know, when we got married, my manager threw us a big party at our house and wanted everybody to know. Put up announcements. This is a Catholic hospital. They put up announcements in the break room, and I thought, you know, how supportive, how wonderful. So I think things have changed. I think more and more people do see, and you know, gay ghettos have disappeared. I mean, it seems like places like the Castro are really an exception, and they don't have that same sort of concentration of gay people. Or
People live everywhere now.
Yeah,
So
right.
Just where they feel safe.
So, if it's okay, I want to go back to you, Chris, because it's interesting that Matt came from this more conservative Mormon
fucked
Utah
up background.
Yeah, and then and you came from a more open family, but you had sort of a slower journey towards coming out, because you said that you came out basically when you started your relationship with Matt, or you know that was really
That's
the
kind of
last step.
finish. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So, what do you think was holding you back from coming out sooner?
Oh, you know, I don't know. I like a lot of gay people. I didn't necessarily start out being in love with the idea of being gay. I wasn't necessarily comfortable with that. It was definitely not a choice. And if I had it to choose, I have to be honest, I would have chosen to be straight. I had a lot of difficulty accepting that. And it took knowing people like Matt and other people that are wonderful people to really open my eyes to the fact that being gay was not bad, and that I was not bad because I was. And so it really wasn't my family that was the problem. It was me. It was me not wanting them or other people to know about this thing that I didn't like about myself.
I want to push back a little bit on that, of saying that the problem was you, because I feel like there must have been something in the culture.
Well, there was something in the culture. I grew up in a really, really homophobic culture. My family wasn't so bad.
Were you like Jersey Shore?
Jersey Shore is a very extreme look at that culture. In fact, most of those people are from Long Island anyway. But yeah, there's some aspects of that where I was, and it was not okay to be gay where I was growing up. It was definitely not okay.
And it was, you graduated from college in '93. I'm assuming so high school in the late '80s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's from the mid '80s to '93. I mean, is the death of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of gay men. Like,
right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yep. There absolutely. I was sure that I was looking down the barrel of a death sentence, and people always said that it's the punishment for something that you're doing that's wrong. It took me a while to accept myself, and it took me a lot longer to be brave enough to share it with the people and to trust the people that I should have trusted from the very beginning, that they would be okay with it, because I wasn't okay with it. And so, all that's changed since then.
Yeah, how do you feel about it now?
Now I just feel like I'm a normal everyday person. I've never really sought to be, I didn't seek this. I didn't seek to, be a firebrand for the people of Alaska to bring this forward. But, Matt was interested in it, and I did believe it was the right thing to do. And now, since we've gotten some recognition, and since the gay marriage question, since the same gender marriage question was settled, so many people throughout the United States that were sort of like not really that okay with people that were gay have switched their minds. They have become much more accepting. They're just like, they've started treating other people like they were just regular people. Everybody's been on their own journey as far as that goes. But I don't feel like I'm walking around with a target on the back of my head anymore. And I'm not 100% sure what a move back would do for us. I mean, would we start to feel like that again? Would we like to start to feel like we couldn't hold hands walking down the street, or be affectionate in public, or we just have to, sit far apart? It's.
Do you hold hands in Anchorage? I mean, do you engage in public display of affection?
Sometimes, not much. I'm not a big PDA guy, but
we do it more elsewhere.
Mm.
We definitely do it more elsewhere.
As I was listening to you talk, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I have a lot of internalized homophobia because my husband and I we don't hold hands in Anchorage.
Yeah, yeah. There's a little, and there's still some difficulty here as far as that goes.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like I really pushed back a lot during this interview of saying, we've come so far, but there's a Puritan streak in Alaska.
Yeah, there is.
I'll just say, when I moved here in 2017, I was working at a clinic in Kenai, and I mentioned to the receptionist that something about my husband, and she volunteered. She was like, oh, we don't have gay marriage in Alaska. And it was 2017, and gay marriage was everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember having to Google and show her. But it's all... I was like, oh, no, actually you do. But it's just kind of funny because when I look back on it now, I think, I'll just say, that moment has never left me.
Mm-hmm.
I probably think about it more frequently than just about any moment, from that period of my life, is her saying, yeah, we don't have that here. You don't say husband here. Because we're called the East Anchorage Book Club Podcast, we ask people to recommend a book. It doesn't have to be your favorite, but any book that you think our listeners should read for any reason whatsoever.
Anything by Edward Abbey.
Okay. Do you have a particular Edward Abbey book that you like?
Monkey Wrench Gang.
Okay. Chris, do you have one? That was Matt. Chris?
I don't know. I would have a harder time coming up with one.
Book of Mormon.
That's the one. That is the one. The Years of Rice and Salt by Kim Stanley Robinson.
What's it about?
It's an alternate history. It's an interesting... I find this kind of stuff really interesting. It's an alternate history in which the author postulates that the Black Plague killed most of the population of Europe instead of just a big portion of them, and what the world might have looked like had European culture not driven development into the future. Mm-hmm. And, well, if Asia and the Americas had more of an influence. And he tells a story by, he's using Asian culture, so he's using the idea of reincarnation as a way of telling the story. And so basically you follow the same group of characters from life to life as they pass through these different periods of history, from the time of the Black Death all the way up through what would have been the equivalent of modern times.
Cool. So it's called The
Years of Rice and Salt.
Very cool. Thank you so much. And big thanks to Matt Hamby and Chris Sheldon for being on the podcast this week. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you to Corey Coolidge for making this podcast listenable. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. Next week, one of the lawyers from Hamby versus Parnell, Kate Shortell. Please tune in.